Welcome back, students, to this second video for the tutorial game Dodge the Creepers in Godot. We're using 4.1 as our version at the moment, and this is just going through the sample tutorial that is provided on the Godot website. The first sections that we have done in video 1, if I just look back at the contents here, was setting up the project, and we created the player itself. So that is the graphics setup and the collision shape for the player. We're now up to this section, coding the player. So that's what we're about to do in this video. I'll be copying and pasting the code from this tutorial. If you don't have this online for some reason, you might have to type the code in. Obviously, you've got to be very careful of your spacings, your punctuations where appropriate, and also your use of capital letters, that they all match exactly what we have here. Or if for some reason you have renamed a node or some part of the game, that you also need to follow that. So try to keep it as consistent as possible. And as in the first section, I'm not going to be reading through this word for word. I strongly encourage that you do, but I'll be trying to point out key things as we go along. So the first thing is we're going to be adding our first script. So we're going to add that to the player node that we've been working on. You can add a script to any node, but it makes sense for it to be at the top level in this case for the entire player. So we're going to do that in this case by clicking on the little script icon here, but as usual there are other options such as some shortcut keys. You can go to the menus as well. We're going to attach the script here. Unless you have a reason to, we're not going to change anything here at this point. We're just going to save it as is, and we are going to end up in our script. Now the first thing I'm going to do is actually delete everything in the script to begin with, just so it's blank. You can actually do that by choosing a blank script when you set it up, but it's just as easy to use the default. Sometimes they're useful, and then just delete if you need to. And that's what was talked about here. So the first bit of script we're going to copy is here. So I'm going to copy that from the site and simply paste it in over here. What this script is doing is extending the area 2D. So it's basically saying take the type of the play, which we know is an area 2D. We can see that here in the pop-up, and basically take everything that area 2D already knows about, and this script is going to add to it. That's what extends means. We're then going to set up some variables. So the first variable is going to be our speed variable, and it's going to have a default value of 400, and we're also going to set a screen size variable, which is not given a value at this point. There's also this important keyword here called @export, or the @ export, which is talked about over here in the text. In essence, that means that this variable speed is going to be available over here in the editor. So if I was to save this scene for the moment, I'll just save it quickly, so that I go instead to the player scene out of the script. So I'll do that by going to the 2D, so I'm seeing the player. If I now look over here in the inspector, that variable that we just made called speed is here. And as it says in the instructions, that's great because we can change this value to test out different things basically. So it creates that variable as an option in our inspector. But let's go back to the script and continue on. Again, I'm not reading everything here. We're now going to create this ready function. So I'm going to again copy this code. I'm just going to put it underneath what we've already done so far, just pasting it in. The underscore ready function is like the first function that gets run when a node is ready to begin functioning in the game. So this is simply getting the viewport. The viewport is a screen that we can see in a rectangular form. So this is a built-in function of an area 2D. It's getting its size and storing that value in screen size. And we can find out more about what this function does if we want to later on, and it is talked a little bit about in here. We're now going to scroll down a bit further, and it says we're going to set up our movement. So we need to talk about, or set up, sorry, which keys are going to be used by our game. So before we can actually use them, we have to set them up. So it talks about going back to our project settings. Let's do that. Project settings. This time we're going to move across to the input map tab, and we're going to add in some new actions. Now the actions we are going to create are move right, and then move left, move up, and move down. So we simply say let's add an action in. So we're going to add a new action, and we type it in. So it's move underscore right, just to match what we're doing in the sample first of all. We'll say add. Alright, and then what happens is we come over here to the little plus and we add the event, so basically what it is that we're going to be looking for when we move right, and I'm going to use the right arrow key on my keyboard, so I'm listening for that to be pressed, and I press it, and you can see that it's recorded it here, and I'm just going to say OK. So the move right is looking for, will be triggered basically by the right arrow. I can also add in more things. Let's say go plus, and I want to also do maybe the WASD keys as well. So maybe D for right. So I can add that in. And if I wanted to, I could even choose, and I don't have a joypad connected to this computer right now, but let's say I wanted to do joypad buttons, and I could choose a button from there as well. But the easier option would be to have my joypad connected and be able to just press it, but let's say I wanted to do the D-pad right, so I'll choose that as well. So all three of these things will trigger the move right action. We're going to do the same thing. I'm not going to do all the extra ones. I'm just going to do the arrow keys for the other options. So let's add a new one in. So it'll be move left. I'm just going to add it in. Oh, I typed that in the wrong spot. I was in the filter. Sorry, I'm wondering what was happening there. Move underscore left. Sorry about that. Press enter. Move up and move down. So I'm just going to add them in, and I'm just going to come in quickly now and add in each of the keys that it needs. So I'm just pressing the appropriate key. I can come back later and add those other options in, like the joypad, if I want to, but for now we're just going to add those arrow keys in. So we've done all of those, and you can see we've added all those in as we went. All right, so move right, move left, move up, move down are all been mapped properly now. Let's come back to our script. So we are in their script at the moment, and I'm going to copy this process function in. So underneath we go, make sure it's level, and process that in. Now the process, as it talks about in here, is the function that is then run every time the game ticks over, basically. So every frame that the game runs, it checks the process function of each node that has one. So I'm not going to go through this in huge detail right now, but basically we set up a velocity which is going to hold our direction and our speed that we're moving. We're then looking at the inputs, each of those 4 inputs that we just set up. Are they being pressed, basically? We are adding or subtracting from the X and Y element of velocity. And then we are coming down here and we're using an if statement and looking at the velocity value and determining whether we are playing or stopping the animation of our sprite. So basically if our player is moving, then the animation should play at this point, and if it is not moving, then it should stop animating. Okay, you can read through in more detail how all this works here, but basically that's what's happening down there. Let's keep going. We're going to copy this into the same script. So making sure it's not part of the if else, we're just going to copy it below. And I can see I've got a little bit of an error there, so I'm just going to bring those 2 lines in so they line up properly. And in this case, it's telling me also that I can't use the tab character for indentation. I need to use something else. So let's use spaces for some reason. We need to get these, whoops. I got that in the wrong spot. So let me put the bracket back in. Okay, so that needs to now be use space to bring it back in, and it's happy again now. So these 3 lines are taking our velocity and using that to work out our X and Y position. So what is our current position, all right? And using the screen size. So again, read through in a bit more detail about what that does there. We've also introduced this idea of delta. Delta is a built-in time element that helps to make sure that your game runs as smoothly as it can on any sort of speed device. So if you've got a slower speed device, or basically less frames per second, it doesn't look like it's jumping around. If you've got a really fast machine, it doesn't look like it's flying across the screen. So it kind of helps to keep it in time, and you can read a bit more about that here at the moment. We now follow down. We're going to look at how we choose which animation to play. Is it going to be the walking animation, or is it going to be the moving up and down animation? So let's again copy this bit of code and place it below this, because this is all part of the process one. So again, unfortunately, we have some spacing issues. So we're going to, in fact, what I might do is just undo that and go back to here and do that. Nope, it didn't like it. So I'm going to put all those in where they should be. Don't need to do the comment, of course. Hopefully we get all that lined up properly. Yep, there we go. So now we're also looking at if the velocity, the x value of velocity, that's the left to right velocity, is not equal to 0, so i.e. some sort of movement horizontally, we're going to set the animation to be the walk animation, and we're also going to flip the animation to be false. Now the flip V is the vertical flip, right? So if it's true, it means we've vertically flipped the animation. If it's false, it means it's just the way it was to begin with. Now think about the X, and if we vertically flip it, then it would actually be upside down compared to where we expect. So if we're moving horizontally, we're saying it's not moving up and down at the moment. So we've gone with walk. But we are flipping the horizontal, and we're using that based on whether the x value is less than 0. So if the x value is less than 0, then we flip it, which means we make it face to the left in this case, because our default animation was the eye was sort of facing to the right. If it's greater than 0, then it's going to be looking to the right still, basically not flipped. And then we also check the y value, and we basically do the same thing again. So you can read through more of this in the instructions here. Okay. We now need one more thing. We need to hide. So add this line to the ready function, so the player will hidden. So what we want actually is to put this line in our ready function, basically because we're hiding the character to begin with. Okay, and again I've got my spacing issue to fix that up there. Okay, now we need to talk a little bit about collisions. So, in fact, let's just go back for a second. If we comment this out for a second, so uncomment that, also comment out the hide, and we play the scene, so not the main play because we haven't set that up yet, but play the scene, we should actually be able to move our character around. So I'm using the arrow keys to move around. That's a good test just to see that everything's working. At the moment we can go off the screen. In fact, no, we can't. That's good. We have, in fact, oh yes, we have added that in. I remember doing that earlier. See if you can work out where that was actually added. I might come back and show you in a moment. But we can run around on our screen, and you can see how our character sort of flips depending which way we're going, and stops if I let go of the keys. However, if we close that, come back and uncomment the hide and try that again, what you'll see is the character appears not to be there. Now it actually is, but right now it's hidden. We can't see it, so it's effectively not there. And I might leave it there for a second in this video because it's already getting a little bit longer, sort of 14 minutes. We'll come back and we will look at collisions in the next one.